All right. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. For today's webinar, we're going to be doing a little bit of a different intro to Reclaim. We're going to be taking a look at the new prioritization system. We launched priorities for the opt-in over the past couple of weeks and are just super excited to talk a little bit more about the upgrades that this prioritization system brings to the table and how you can maximize your scheduling overall by being able to prioritize everything on your calendar and make sure that you're getting that time in the books for the things that are most important to you. I'm going to hand it over to Henry Shapiro, a co-founder at Reclaim, who has been behind this project from the beginning. And Henry, why don't you get us started in talking a little bit about why this big change has been on the horizon and why this is such an exciting update for Reclaim.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Really excited to chat about priorities. And this set of changes is kind of like, I would say, we've been working on it for months, and it's also, I would say, more like years in the making. If you've been using Reclaim for more than like a year, you probably know that we've done a few iterations on this. This is one of those problems we've been thinking about from the beginning, since we started Reclaim, of how would we bring more context into the calendar about what matters to you. Like, our belief is that scheduling very often is not a math problem. It's a negotiation problem. It's a prioritization problem. And we believe that in order to better schedule your work week, we have to know more, Reclaim has to know more, and your calendar has to know more about what matters to you. And so we've gone through a whole bunch of different iterations on like the best way to represent that problem in our product and the best way to sort of model that problem in our product. And so this set of changes was really motivated by that. Our goal is that over the coming months and years, we're going to be delivering more and more scheduling features, things like meeting scheduling features, task scheduling features, habit scheduling features that are going to rely on Reclaim having a really clear picture of what's important, and not just what's important, in isolation, but also what's important from a relative standpoint. Like, is this habit or routine more important than making time for this project? And so that was really what motivated this, is we wanted to have a universal system for Reclaim to understand your priorities. And then there were a whole bunch of, like, we'll call them just micro problems we wanted to address with this. And so one of the things that I'm going to sort of start by doing is just introducing folks to the new system and how prioritization works. I'll talk a little bit about how that's going to show up on the calendar and what you can do with it kind of off the bat. And then I'll talk a little bit about tasks specifically and some of the changes that we've made there. There's a whole bunch of improvements on that front. And then I'll talk a little bit about kind of what we're doing over the next few weeks as we start rolling this out to everyone in Reclaim. As Elizabeth mentioned, we have an opt-in right now where you can, join the beta. And then in the coming, I'd say, month or so, we're going to be pushing this out to everyone in Reclaim. So I'll start by sharing my screen here. Oh, no. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh, no. 1 second. All right.
There we go. All right. Wow, that was fast.
And we do have a Q&A section. If you want to leave any questions, we'll leave some time at the end to go through those product questions. Anything else that you wanted to ask, Henry, let's leave those in there.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. So if you've opted into the beta, you'll see a screen that kind of looks like this. The big change kind of immediately off the bat is, again, if you've been using Reclaim prior to this announcement and this launch, you'd probably recall that there were lots of different ways that certain things were prioritized in Reclaim. Tasks had their own system, habits had their own system, scheduling links had their own system, Smart One-on-Ones didn't really have a system. And so we wanted to, again, sort of unify everything under these core 4 priority levels. And so there are now really 4 different priority levels for everything in Reclaim. So everything that you use, your scheduling links, your habits, your one-on-ones, your tasks, they're all going to kind of fit into one of these 4 priorities. One of the other big things that we've released here that I'll talk about in a minute is the ability to also prioritize your non-Reclaim events. And I'll talk a little bit in a moment about why that's so useful. You can change priorities on anything. When you get migrated over, we'll automatically kind of move everything over to different priority levels based on what we kind of assume or think that priority level maps to. But if we got it wrong, or if you want to reprioritize things, you can do that by either dragging them to different areas like this, or you can just edit the priority from here. One of the first things I think that you'll kind of notice is that we're kind of showing you all these, all of your different Reclaim items in each of these priority levels. And so a natural question might be like, what's the ordering of these things? We basically are scheduling your Smart 101s first. That's basically the same as in the old system. So if there's a conflict between a Smart 101 and like an important habit or task, we're going to schedule that 101 first. And then we're going to go through your habits, and then we're going to go through your tasks in order of due date within each priority level. So generally, this should work, more or less the same way. That's the same kind of rough scheduling order that we had before, but it's just kind of in each of these priority levels. The other reason we moved to having these 4 kind of priority levels as opposed to having like a big stack rank of things is one of the other features we delivered, which I'll show you in a bit here when we get into tasks, was the ability to pull in priorities from all of our different integrations. So this has been one of our most popular feature requests that have come up since we launched our task integrations. People have wanted us to be able to take things from Todoist that were high priority or from Jira that were high priority and automatically map them to the correct priority level in Reclaim. The old system really didn't give us a nice way to do that because it was just like a big stack rank list of things. And so now with this, we have mapping for every single integration. You can see more info in the help docs that are on this page here, which Elizabeth's put together. You can kind of get a sense of how all that mapping works. But if you use those integrations and you're on the prioritization beta, that's already working for you. You've already got those priorities flowing in. So a P1 task in Todoist becomes a P1 task in Reclaim. So that's kind of the core of the new system. When I head over to the planner, as I mentioned, this is not just for Reclaim managed events, right? I can see here my one-on-ones have this priority level on them, which I can change here. But the other thing that's really unique about what we're trying to do here is we're also trying to bring prioritization directly into the calendar events themselves. And so I can do things like, hey, this, Data Viz team weekly, this like team meeting that I have, this is actually a high priority event. It's not something that is like more critical than say a customer meeting or something that I might want to make some more time for, but it's a high priority event. We'll call it P2. And so I can go in and I can actually apply priorities on my non-Reclaim events. And we're going to be evolving this system more and more in the coming weeks. But what that also means is that I can do things like send a link that's a P1 link, like a high priority link, and that time will actually be shown as available. And so there's just a lot of nice little ways that you can kind of use this system. Again, the goal here is maximizing your availability for the things that matter to you. And our perspective is there's lots of things that go on our calendars that may be important, but that we'd be willing to skip in service of something more important. Just as an important note on this front right now, all events that come into the system that aren't Reclaim created are going to get marked as critical by default. That's because we don't want to overbook anything or assume that we can overbook anything for now. And so you basically are going to go and kind of tag those things as they come up. The other thing to note is that even if a normal calendar event is lower priority, we're not currently going to put habits, tasks, or Smart 101s over those events. Our goal is to get there someday, and we really want to get to this place where eventually priorities are sort of like the real engine that kind of drives every single bit of scheduling on your calendar. But in the near term, we decided that was just potentially a little too weird from the beginning. We didn't want to create too much chaos on your calendar. So this will work for scheduling links, though. And the reason we chose scheduling links as a first starting ground is, again, those customer meetings, those external meetings, those tend to be the things we're willing to kind of move things around on our calendars for. And so that was what we really wanted to unlock with that capability. So that kind of just gives you a view of how priorities show up on the calendar and how you can kind of see them not only on your Reclaim stuff, but on your non-Reclaim stuff. So moving over to tasks specifically, probably the biggest change that we've made to tasks here is that we've introduced this concept of a section called Up Next. And what Up Next is designed to do is it's very similar to the old kind of stack ranking UI that you used for tasks previously, except it's really designed with like the next, like we'll call it 3 to 5, next 7 days of work in mind. And we introduced a whole bunch of other really nice improvements to the stack ranking and Up Next, things like ignoring the don't schedule before dates and making sure that we don't put in breaks in between those things so that we get them scheduled basically as soon as you want them to be scheduled, and we get them scheduled in the order that you want them scheduled. And so anytime you put something in Up Next, it's going to really focus on trying to get that thing scheduled as soon as possible. And you can see here, I didn't really have the time that I needed to get the whole thing done today, but you can see really quickly those QBR slides came in. When I create a task, I can decide whether I want to send it to Up Next by default. I can literally just click this little guy and decide whether I want it to be in there. But by default, if I just create a task called write the docs, and it's due on November 2nd, I'll just leave everything as is. You'll notice that this just comes in as what we would call just like a normal priority task. And so this is just going to get scheduled according to kind of my normal set of priorities. So P1 stuff goes first, P2 stuff goes second, and so on and so forth. So Up Next is a really big improvement. And if you're the kind of person who was using stack ranking really heavily before, this is really like, I think Up Next is a much better solution based on all the testing we've done around it for what you're really trying to do with stack ranking, which was sort of like, this is the sequence that I want these things to happen in. Up Next is going to do a significantly better job of accomplishing that than our old stack ranking system ever did, candidly. And so I think the goal here, the way to kind of think about these two sections is Up Next is really if you want a lot of control over where the task is going to land and kind of getting it done as soon as possible. And this other section, this sort of normal prioritization section, that's just kind of like, I'm going to let Reclaim sort of do its thing. And I'm going to let Reclaim sort of make those decisions about where this stuff goes based on where my priorities are. The other thing we've added here is some much easier access to due date editing. This is one of our most requested feature requests over the past, I'd say, year or so. For a long time, editing the due date was kind of cumbersome. You had to go into the task and change the start date and the due date. We've added a whole new time picker here, and you can now edit due dates directly from these task cards, which is really useful if you're trying to do things like, hey, I don't really want this to be up next. I just want it to schedule sooner. You can just update that start date from directly in here, and you'll get that stuff updated. So on that note, a whole bunch of changes kind of came in to all of kind of our card layouts here. You might notice in tasks, you've now got this sort of different view of kind of how these actions are laid out. We introduced other types of things like list and grid views for habits and for smart one-on-ones and for scheduling links. We also implemented search across all of those things. We've got a whole bunch of work to do to bring actually a whole new universal search experience that's coming very soon. But lots of little UI improvements, kind of little quality of life improvements that I think you're going to notice as you use this new system. And some of those improvements got pushed out independently of the priority system. So even if you're not on the beta, you may have noticed them. But that's really a lot of the stuff that we're going to be kind of iterating on and improving in the coming weeks. So I think those are probably like the main things I wanted to cover on the core prioritization system itself. And then the other thing I guess I'll just talk about briefly while we're here, and then I can kind of turn it over for Q&A and kind of answer anything that's come up so far, is just kind of what's coming next year. I think there's a couple big focus points for us in the coming, I'd say, week or so. The first is there's going to be a whole bunch of cleanup on this area and also on this area up here. You can see this is a little janky looking right now. This top bar is going to become basically the place where you search and you filter your tasks. And we're also going to be bringing back the sort options that you saw in V14, where you can sort these things by due date or by priority. So if you want to see a big long list of your tasks in order of priority, you can do that. If you want to see a list in order of due date, you can do that as well. And we're also just going to be kind of cleaning up the experience up here a little bit. So a lot more like sorting and filtering and search options that are going to come into tasks, and just a lot of like visual cleanup that I think will help to make this feel a little a little tighter. And the same thing's going to happen with scheduling links. We're probably going to be kind of cleaning up this area up here. I mentioned universal search. We have a new universal search component that we're going to be rolling out. It's actually going to enable you to search across everything in Reclaim. You can kind of do that with priorities here. So we've kind of sort of delivered it here, but there's going to be some nice little things like keyboard shortcuts and other kinds of little quick actions that are going to come with that search component, as well as like you'll actually be able to search across everything here instead of habits and tasks. So this is an area we've kind of haven't done a lot of work on over the past few months, and definitely excited to bring that out as well. I'd say the other piece, and this is more of a scheduler optimization, kind of algorithmic optimization, is we're going to be kind of thinking a lot, and this is like I'd say a long journey for us, but I think we're going to have some initial releases on it in the coming week or so. We're thinking a lot about how in this new system we can help you to express when something might be lower priority, but is still at risk. And one, I'd say, rough edge of this system that folks have run into so far is kind of like right now we're thinking of it in terms of everything in P1 goes first, and then everything in P2, and then everything in P3, and so forth. What we want to build is a system where generally that's how it works. But if something in P2 has really limited time before it can get done, and you're running out of time, it's at risk, it's a task or a habit that's just not going to hit its goal, we want to have ways for our scheduler to intelligently sort of boost those things and kind of give them a little bit more importance. So they're not actually going to move into P1, but they're going to kind of like take a little more precedence in terms of scheduling. And so particularly for tasks, I would expect to see some really interesting scheduler improvements here that I think are going to help to kind of bridge that gap between what I think folks were sort of using that full stack ranking interface for before versus kind of where we're headed now, where we have these 4 priority levels in this up next area. So I'd say that's kind of one of the big pushes we're making on the scheduler side of things. And then really a lot of cleanup to get us into a full GA here. Our goal is to roll this system out to all of our users. We've got several thousand using it today already. And in order to do that, we want to make sure that there's really good onboarding materials in here. There's really good training materials. And so we're going to be releasing that in the coming days here. And then additionally, lots of little things, updating our Google Calendar add-on, which is pretty updated already with a lot of the new interface here. So you can see we've already kind of launched this new look at your priorities, here. But we've got a little bit more work to do to kind of clean this up. And then our Slack integration is also going to get some new treatment as well. So lots of little things to do, but we're feeling really good about the system as it stands. We've been testing it a ton internally, getting tons of user feedback. You've already sent us feedback. Thank you so much for that. And with that, I know we're running short on time, so I would love to pause here and take any questions that have come up. And I'll check the Q&A section for that.
Yeah, I can relay the questions if that's helpful. Kenny asks, I use HubSpot for my meeting links because it's heavily integrated with all of my sales tools. How can I make sure those meetings benefit from this system? I think that speaks nicely to being able to prioritize non-Reclaim created events.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think ideally in the future, we're going to have a HubSpot integration and webhook support, and hopefully be able to we use HubSpot ourselves internally, and there's all sorts of use cases we want to integrate our scheduling links platform with HubSpot for. I would say that there's already a bunch of ways in which Reclaim already benefits just sort of generic, calling HubSpot's meeting scheduling generic. I don't mean it in a pejorative way, but more like they only look at free and busy events. They don't look at things like priority or at risk or other types of factors that Reclaim looks at. So one thing, if you've been a Reclaim user for a while, or even if you haven't, you may have noticed is Reclaim sort of creates these events on your calendar that have like these free emojis and these shield emojis. And what that's really denoting is whether we have marked the time as free or marked it as busy. And what Reclaim's kind of doing is we're sort of running these like millions and millions of simulations every single day against your calendar and trying to understand sort of how much time and how many opportunities we have to schedule something. And if we see that your time is kind of limited and you're kind of running out of time to get something done, we'll put the time on the calendar, but we'll mark it as busy time. And if we see that you've actually got a decent amount of free time, like a bunch of flexibility inside of the habit that you're looking at or inside of the task you're looking at, we're going to mark it as free time. And what that means is that systems like HubSpot or any scheduling links platform, or even Google Calendar, if I use like the find a time feature here, you can see I've actually got way more availability on my calendar than meets the eye. So that's a layer we've had in place forever. That's one of the like core kind of differentiators of using Reclaim is you get this flexibility where you get the time you need, but it's not like blocking everything out and preventing you from getting meetings. So that's one kind of layer that you can use even outside of Reclaim. The prioritization piece, unfortunately, tools like HubSpot don't look at priority. So if you were to send out a priority link, a link through HubSpot, and you've got a meeting here marked as like P2, like here, HubSpot doesn't know that that meeting's marked P2. This is a broader topic. Patrick, my co-founder, and I have been talking to different calendar companies and different scheduling companies to see if we can align on like a universal standard for this metadata so that any platform can take advantage of it and any platform can take advantage of things like priority levels. But my advice, of course, I'm biased, would be to use our scheduling links, which allow you to actually set, whether you have a critical priority for that meeting you're trying to schedule or high priority, medium priority. A really common use case that we've seen already emerging for this system is in sales and in pre-sales, where people are trying to get customer meetings scheduled and they want to express as much availability as they possibly can to those folks so that they can kind of get the right meeting scheduled sooner. So I would say, short answer is we already should benefit systems like HubSpot just by keeping your time a little more flexible. Priorities are also one thing I didn't quite talk about was that priorities also sort of impact that free busy. So I guess one other way you could help yourself kind of using them is make some of the habits or tasks that you're not as concerned about like getting time for, or you'd be willing to trade off, make those lower priority. And that'll mean that they're more likely to be free on your calendar because we're going to be a little less aggressive in defending them. But that is all just kind of serving this idea of like, make sure you have as much free time on the calendar for meetings as possible. Sorry, kind of a long answer, but really interesting question. So thank you.
Yeah, and HubSpot integration is on the roadmap as potentially one of our next integrations there. We do have a question from Kennedy. How does Up Next work with Todoist? And if we wanted to sort of touch on the integrations, Henry.
Yeah. So we actually, it's funny, we were just talking about this yesterday. We have Up Next support for our Slack integration, or it's coming out very soon. I don't think we ever added Up Next into Google Tasks or Todoist, but it's the kind of thing that would be fairly easy for us to do. So I'm probably after this going to file a ticket for us to go do that. Right now, you can't tell Todoist to schedule something in Up Next by default. So we have new natural language. If you go to, probably the easiest way, honestly, is to go to our amazing help docs. I probably would struggle with demoing Todoist live here. But if you go and check out this section in this Notion page or Notion database that Elizabeth has lovingly put together, you can kind of get a sense of how we're mapping these priorities here. And so in Todoist, good for Todoist, they have 4 priority levels. We map them basically 1-to-1. So if you create something in Todoist that's a critical priority or a highest priority item, it will come over automatically into the system as that priority. And then from there, if you wanted to send it to Up Next, you would literally just say, send this task to Up Next. We've considered having a default option where like all your tasks go into Up Next, but we're not in love with that option just yet. I think the solution here, or something that might be really nice, would be adding that as natural language, where you could just say like Up Next, and that would just get added as part of the task definition. And I was just thinking the other day that we didn't add this for Todoist and Google Tasks yet. So like I said, I'm going to file a ticket for it and we'll get it done. Yeah.
Next we have, is grouping tasks under specific projects on the roadmap?
It's a great question. I would say that we have not yet put that on a timeline. We haven't said like we're going to go do projects. God, these are such interesting philosophical questions. Project management is a very busy space. There's a reason that we decided to integrate with project management and task solutions instead of building our own. There's lots and lots of interesting problems that we want to go solve there, but we believe that the more interesting problem for us to go solve is around scheduling. And it is a much less solved problem, and one with far fewer large incumbent competitors who have tons of features that we would have to go and build to really compete. So I'd say short term, like probably not as we don't have a timeline. It's not on the roadmap at this moment, but it is something we're discussing. And I think that the first kind of like, it's not exactly projects, but the first way that we sort of started to expose this, or the way that we kind of thought, hey, this would be the most valuable way to show this to people, is really through custom hours. I know a lot of users who will basically set up a range of hours where they want to do certain types of work. And that could include like project X work. And I think that's really where we think the interesting value would be for us in doing a projects feature, is like the ability to assign projects to different kinds of hours. And so we're not quite there yet, but like I would try playing with custom hours to see how that helps you, because that is one way we've thought about kind of grouping tasks. And we wanted to sort of get this feature out there before we started building a feature like projects. But definitely something we're thinking about.
Another question from Kenny: is there a way to create tasks via mobile, as well as Google Workspace, without having the Reclaim tab open? And I think actually, if you are a Mac user, I just wanted to note the Raycast one would be a great option for this.
Yeah, let me actually, I'm going to share my whole screen here so that I don't lose Raycast. So yeah, if you're a Mac user, we have a Raycast extension, and you can create tasks right from here. They're all updated. If you're on v16, it includes the up next as well as the priority level. You can see all your tasks here. We also have a really nifty little menu bar that you can see up here. So Raycast is one great way of doing it if you're on desktop. On mobile, there's kind of a couple different ways to handle it today. One way that people do it is by using our integrations, including with Google Tasks. So Google Tasks, has a mobile app, and you can go in and add tasks into this list here and use the kind of natural language to get those tasks scheduled. Or if you use a paid integration with something like Todoist or Asana, they also have mobile apps that you can use on the go. And then lastly, you can add Reclaim as a PWA, a progressive web app, which is basically like you go into Safari. It's a pretty easy thing. We have a help doc on it in our help center, where you basically add it as an icon on iOS, and it's just opening up our web app, our mobile web app, in a sort of like container view. So it kind of looks like an app. So we don't have a full-blown mobile app right now, but we have a lot of different ways to get tasks into the system, either using existing mobile apps that are out there or using our progressive web app.
Awesome. Will iCloud calendars ever be able to directly integrate? I'm using Workaround, but it's not great.
Yeah, another good question. We are in the process right now of building, and I see another question in here about O365. So this is hopefully going to answer that question as well. We're in the process right now of building the foundations that are going to allow us to extend Reclaim to Office 365. And I say Office 365, but really what we're building is the architecture that's going to allow us to extend to any calendar platform. When we built Reclaim, being, scrappy startup people, we like bound everything in our system to Google Calendar. And so there's lots of stuff in our code that's like very reliant on Google Calendar to work. And so we're kind of decoupling a lot of that stuff and basically getting ourselves to a place where we can shim into any calendar service that is out there. That said, as a business, we also have to make tough choices. And as you can probably imagine, Office 365 has a much, much larger market share, particularly among teams and enterprises. And we just have far more people on that wait list by a factor of probably 1000x. And so we're probably going to start with Office 365. But the use case around iCloud, primarily for a lot of people, is calendar sync. That may not be like your case. You may want to actually directly schedule on iCloud. I think, unfortunately, we're not likely to support that anytime soon. But the case of like, I just want to sync my iCloud calendar to Reclaim, and I don't want that, or to my Google Calendar, and I don't want the delays that you're probably experiencing and all the weird stuff that happens between those calendar services, which unfortunately is not anything we have any control over. That's the kind of thing that I could envision us adding iCloud support for. We've had a couple of other customers bring this up kind of recently. So I'd say, let's never say never, but I would say that it's probably not going to be as high priority for us as getting Office 365 out the door. To that question about Office 365, I think next year is my hope. We're doing a lot of the foundational work right now. By the end of the year, we should be in a position where we could start to bring it to market. We have talked about our initial release for it being just for calendar sync, just to like get something out there that will start to kind of unlock some use cases where I can sync an O365 calendar directly through authentication to my Google Calendar and vice versa. And then probably we'll start, iterating towards full-blown support for Office 365, where you can use it as like your main account and like schedule stuff directly on there. But yeah, it's a big body of work, and we're very, very excited to get it out there.
We're at time here. I think we can fit one more question. Is scheduling overnight in the product roadmap?
Not currently. It comes up every so often, and I think that right now the best workaround to it is to basically create hours that sort of bridge across multiple days. So you could do like 8 to 11:59 p.m. and then like 12 a.m. to 6 p.m. and that's kind of like your overnight hours. So you can do that. It's not ideal. I understand why people want to do it for things like sleeping or other kinds of like habits that you want to block time across the calendar for. Another way you can support this is by having 2 habits for something that you want to block overnight. So you'd have like the evening version and the super early morning version. So there's workarounds to it today. It's not currently on our roadmap, but it's something that as we do a lot of this work to kind of re-architect and rethink some of the core parts of our platform, features like that may become a lot easier for us to pull off. So again, not on the roadmap currently, but something that we hear about and definitely on our radar.
Awesome. And I know we're on time here, but I wanted to say thank you to Henry for joining me today on today's webinar and walking through all of this. We're really excited about the options and the power that prioritization is going to bring users for smarter scheduling. Thank you so much for joining us. There'll be a follow-up with a link to this webinar for on demand if you wanted to rewatch it or catch up on anything in an email. And we appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for joining and for opting in. I did link the wiki in the webinar chat if you wanted to check that out to learn more about priorities. But we're very excited to hear more about what you think of the new updates. So thank you, Henry. Thank you to everyone for joining today. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your week and great weekend.
Thanks all. Take care.